The summer heat pressed against the windows of Corvino Enterprises like an unwanted guest, making the air conditioning work overtime. I adjusted my collar for the third time that morning, the fabric scratching against skin that still felt raw, despite the concealer I'd layered on before dawn. The elevator mirror had shown me what I already knew. No amount of makeup could hide what I was trying to conceal. Not really. It just made the lie more elaborate. My fingers trembled slightly as I sorted through the morning correspondence, a stack of envelopes and reports that needed Theo Corvino's attention before his 9 o'clock meeting. 6 months I'd worked here, 6 months of learning his preferences. Black coffee, no sugar. Reports organized by urgency, not alphabetically. Phone calls screened with polite firmness. 6 months of watching him command rooms with nothing more than his presence, of seeing grown men stumble over their words when he asked a simple question. The bruise on my left arm throbbed beneath the long sleeves of my blouse. July in the city, and I was dressed for October. The other secretaries had already made comments, gentle inquiries wrapped in concern that I'd deflected with practiced ease. "I run cold," I'd said, smiling the smile I'd perfected over years of explaining away things that shouldn't need explaining. "Office buildings are always freezing, Iris." His voice cut through my thoughts, smooth and controlled as always. Theo stood in his office doorway, impeccable in charcoal gray, his dark eyes fixed on me with that intensity that made my stomach tighten. Not from fear. I'd learned to distinguish the flavors of that particular emotion, but from something else I didn't want to examine. My office. Now. I gathered the sorted correspondence, checking my collar one more time before crossing the threshold into his domain. The office smelled of leather and expensive cologne, underlaid with something I'd come to associate specifically with him. Control, measured and absolute. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, but Theo rarely looked at the view. His attention was always focused inward, on whatever problem needed solving, whatever business required his particular brand of resolution. "Close the door." My hand hesitated on the handle. We'd been alone before, countless times, but something in his tone felt different, sharper. I pushed the door shut and heard the soft click of the latch engaging. "The Rossetti contracts need your signature," I began, moving toward his desk with the folder extended. Professional, efficient, the mask I wore better than any makeup. And the zoning board called about, "Why are you wearing a turtleneck in July?" The question landed like a physical blow. I'd expected many things from Theo Corvino, demands, orders, the casual exercise of authority that came as naturally to him as breathing. But not this. Not curiosity about my wardrobe choices. "I told you, I run cold. The air conditioning in here. You're sweating." He moved around the desk, closing the distance between us with 3 measured steps. "Your collar is damp. Try again." My throat constricted. I could feel the heat radiating from my face, could smell my own fear mixing with the subtle scent of the concealer I'd applied with shaking hands at 5 a.m. "Mr. Corvino, I really don't think—" "Theo." His hand reached out, not touching, just hovering near my shoulder. "You've worked for me for 6 months. You call me Theo when we're alone. You know that." I did know that. It was one of the first things he'd told me, delivered with the same absolute certainty he brought to every declaration. "No, Mr. Corvino behind closed doors. No, sir. No, boss. Just Theo," as if the informality could somehow bridge the canyon between his world and mine. "The contracts." I tried again, holding the folder like a shield. "You have a meeting at 9. I'll reschedule." He took the folder from my hands, set it on the desk without looking at it. "What happened to your arm?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "Nothing happened to my arm." "Show me." "That's inappropriate, Mr. Theo. That's an inappropriate request from an employer." Something flickered in his eyes, there and gone too quickly for me to name. You're right. It is. He stepped back, giving me space I hadn't realized I needed. So, I'm asking as someone who's concerned. Please show me your arm. The please undid me. Men like Theo Corvino didn't say please, didn't ask when they could simply take. I'd watched him negotiate deals that would make lesser men weep, had seen him dismiss executives with a single cutting remark. But now he stood before me, waiting, and the pleas hung in the air between us like an offering. My hands moved to my collar before I could stop them. The fabric slid down, exposing the mottled purple and yellow that bloomed across my collarbone, spreading down my shoulder like some grotesque flower. I heard his sharp intake of breath, watched his hands curl into fists at his sides. Who did this to you? The question came out flat, emotionless. Somehow that was worse than if he'd shouted. I pulled my collar back up, fingers clumsy with shame and something that felt dangerously like relief. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. He moved to the windows, putting his back to me, giving me the privacy of his inattention. Tell me what I should think when my secretary comes to work in July wearing winter clothes and 3 layers of makeup. The story spilled out before I could stop it. My mother, Helena, who'd never been good at picking men. Humberto, her latest mistake, who drank too much and loved too little. Last night, when the shouting had started and then escalated into something worse. My mother screams. My decision to intervene, to put myself between them, to take the blows meant for her. I got her out, I finished, my voice barely above a whisper. She's staying with my aunt across town. She's safe. Theo turned back to me, and what I saw in his face made my breath catch. Not pity. I'd learned to recognize that particular expression, had seen it in the eyes of teachers and social workers and well-meaning strangers my entire life. This was something else, something colder and infinitely more dangerous. Where is he now? Humberto. I don't know. Probably at the apartment, sleeping it off. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the summer heat. It doesn't matter. My mother won't press charges. She never does. It matters. He crossed back to me, stopped just close enough that I could see the pulse jumping in his throat. Give me his address. I'll take care of it. And there it was. The offer I'd been afraid of, wrapped in concern but hiding something I recognized all too well. Violence answering violence. Power asserting itself through force. I took a step back, felt the desk press against my legs. No. His eyebrows rose fractionally. No? I appreciate the offer, Theo. Really. But I don't need you to take care of it. I forced myself to meet his eyes, to hold his gaze even as my instincts screamed at me to look away. I don't need you to do whatever it is you're thinking of doing. You don't know what I'm thinking of doing. Yes, I do. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I know exactly what you're thinking of doing, and I'm telling you no. The silence stretched between us, taut as a wire. I could see him processing my refusal, could almost hear the calculations running behind those dark eyes. Men like Theo Corvino weren't told no. They weren't denied, weren't refused. They asked. No, they suggested, and the world rearranged itself to accommodate them. Why? The single word carried genuine confusion. Because I'm afraid. The truth escaped before I could dress it in more palatable language. I'm afraid of what you'll do. I'm afraid of what it means to owe someone like you a favor. I'm afraid. I stopped, swallowed hard against the thickness in my throat. I'm afraid your kind of help comes with a price I can't afford to pay. Understanding dawned across his features, followed by something that might have been hurt if men like him were capable of such vulnerability. He nodded slowly, stepped back, gave me room to breathe. I understand. His voice had returned to its usual measured control, the brief glimpse of something more human disappearing behind the mask of authority he wore so well. "But I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Not as your employer, but as someone who—" He paused, seemed to reconsider his words. "As someone who would like to ensure your safety." I waited, barely breathing. "Let me assign someone to watch over you, discreetly. You won't even know he's there most of the time." Theo moved back to his desk, picked up his phone, sent a quick text. "His name is Ivo. He's good at his job, and his job will be to make sure Humberto doesn't come near you or your mother again. That's not necessary. It's already done." He looked up from his phone, and the expression on his face was pure Theo Corvino, immovable, absolute. "This isn't negotiable, Iris. You can refuse my help with Humberto directly, but you can't stop me from ensuring my secretary's safety. Consider it a workplace perk." I should have argued, should have insisted on my independence, on my ability to handle my own problems. But exhaustion pulled at me, the kind that came from too many years of being strong when I wanted nothing more than to collapse. And beneath the exhaustion, something else whispered seductively. What if I let someone help? Just this once? Okay. The word felt like surrender and relief in equal measure. "Thank you." Theo nodded, already turning his attention back to business, to the contracts that needed signing and the meetings that needed rescheduling. But as I gathered the forgotten folder and moved toward the door, his voice stopped me one more time. "Iris." I turned back, found him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "I'm not him. Whatever you're afraid I'll become, whatever you think I'm capable of, I would never hurt you. I need you to know that." The declaration hung in the air between us, weighted with sincerity I wasn't sure how to process. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and escaped to the safety of my desk outside his office. As I sank into my chair, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Ivo. I'm parked across the street in the gray sedan. Don't look for me. Just know I'm here." I glanced out the window without thinking, caught a glimpse of the vehicle he'd mentioned, felt something in my chest loosen fractionally. Not safety. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of something close to it. The bruises would fade, I knew. They always did. But as I turned back to my work, pulling up Theo's calendar to reschedule his morning, I wondered if this feeling, this strange combination of fear and hope, and something I didn't want to name, would prove just as temporary. The weeks that followed our conversation settled into a rhythm I hadn't expected. Theo never mentioned the bruises again, never asked about my mother or Humberto, never pressed for details I wasn't ready to give. But the evidence of his concern manifested in subtle ways I was learning to recognize. Ivo became a constant but invisible presence. True to Theo's promise, I rarely saw him, but I felt him there. A shadow that moved when I moved, a car that always seemed to be parked nearby, a figure that appeared at just the right moment when I stayed late at the office and needed to walk to my car in the darkened garage. The first time I'd consciously acknowledged his presence with a small wave, he'd nodded back, his weathered face breaking into something that might have been a smile. My mother called daily now, her voice lighter than I'd heard it in years. She'd moved in with my aunt permanently, had started attending therapy sessions I suspected Theo had somehow arranged and paid for, though he'd never admit it. When I'd asked her about the counseling, she'd been vague. "The community center offers free services. Can you believe that?" I could believe it about as much as I believed the gray sedan that appeared outside my aunt's building every evening was coincidence. Work at Corvino Enterprises continued with its usual intensity. Theo's business dealings remained opaque to me. I scheduled meetings with people whose names I recognized from news reports, filed paperwork for companies I didn't quite understand, and maintained the careful professional distance I'd perfected over 6 months of employment. But something had shifted between us. Subtle as a change in air pressure before a storm, I noticed how he never raised his voice in my presence, even when clients frustrated him or deals fell through. Other secretaries whispered about Theo's legendary temper, about furniture that had been replaced after particularly difficult negotiations, about executives who'd emerged from his office looking shaken. But with me, his voice remained level, controlled, almost gentle. "Iris, did you finish the Moretti contracts?" he'd ask, appearing at my desk with the same quiet intensity he brought to everything. "Almost. I'm just double-checking the clauses on page 17. There's a discrepancy in the numbers that doesn't make sense." He'd lean over my shoulder to examine the document, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Not that I thought about things like that anymore. Not since Theo had quietly arranged for my salary to increase by 30%, citing my exceptional attention to detail when I'd questioned it. "Good catch." His finger would point to the error, never touching mine, but close enough that I felt the warmth radiating from his skin. "This is why I keep you around." "I thought you kept me around for my winning personality." I'd shoot back, the words escaping before I could stop them. It was a dangerous game I'd started playing, this casual insolence that I somehow only dared with him. With other executives, I maintained perfect professionalism. With clients, I was efficiency personified. But with Theo, I found myself pushing boundaries I didn't even know existed, testing limits he never seemed to enforce. His eyes would crinkle slightly at the corners, the closest thing to a smile I usually got from him. That too. 3 months after the morning he'd first seen my bruises, I made my biggest mistake. I'd stayed late to finish a presentation for his meeting with the zoning board, had been so focused on perfecting the slides that I hadn't noticed the time. When I finally looked up, the office was dark, except for the lamp at my desk, and the light spilling from Theo's office. I gathered the printed materials, knocked on his doorframe. "I have the presentation ready. Do you want to review it now, or should I leave it on your desk?" "Come in." He was standing at his window, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that my treacherous brain insisted on noticing. "What time is it?" "Almost 9. He turned, frowning. "You should have gone home hours ago. Is Ivo still here?" "He leaves at 7 unless I tell him otherwise." I set the presentation on his desk, tried to ignore the flutter in my stomach that his concern created. "I can take the subway. It's fine." "It's not fine." He pulled out his phone, typed quickly. "Ivo will be here in 15 minutes. Wait in your office until he arrives." "Theo, I'm perfectly capable." "I know you are." His voice softened fractionally. "Humor me anyway." I should have argued, should have insisted on my independence, on my ability to navigate the city I'd lived in my entire life. But the truth was, having Ivo's protection had become something I relied on more than I wanted to admit. Something that let me breathe easier, sleep better, move through my days without the constant low-grade fear that had been my companion for so long. "Thank you." The words came easier now than they had 2 months ago. "Coffee?" He moved to the small kitchen area in his office, a luxury most executives didn't have. "I'm about to make some. I have another few hours of work ahead of me." I should have declined, should have maintained the professional boundary between employer and employee, boss and secretary. But the office felt different at night, intimate in a way that daylight didn't allow, and I was tired of always doing what I should. "Black, no sugar." His eyebrow rose. "You've been paying attention." "It's literally my job to pay attention to your preferences." "Is it?" He handed me a cup, the ceramic warm against my palms. "I thought your job was to manage my schedule and file my paperwork." "That too." I took a sip, felt the caffeine hit my system like a small electric shock. "Though technically, making coffee for you violates at least 3 different employment law provisions about gender-based workplace expectations." This time he actually smiled, a real one that transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made my breath catch. File a complaint with HR. I'll take my chances with the lawsuit. You are HR. Conflict of interest. Noted. We stood there in his office, drinking coffee at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, and for the first time since I'd started working for him, I let myself acknowledge what I'd been carefully not thinking about for months. I liked Theo Corvino. Not as an employer, not as the dangerous man whose empire I only partially understood, but as a person. As someone who made me coffee and worried about my safety, and never once pressured me for more than I was willing to give. The moment shattered when my phone buzzed. Ivo, announcing his arrival. I set down my cup, gathered my things, tried to ignore the disappointment that felt entirely too much like longing. Iris, Theo's voice stopped me at the door. Be careful going home. I always am, I know. His eyes held mine for a beat too long, but be careful anyway. The next morning, I arrived at my desk to find flowers. Not roses, too obvious, too much, but a simple arrangement of white lilies in a crystal vase. No card, no explanation, just beauty sitting on my desk like a question I wasn't ready to answer. Secret admirer? Gabriella from accounting waggled her eyebrows suggestively as she passed. Probably a client, I lied, already knowing the truth. Knowing it in the way the flowers were arranged. Simple, elegant, understated. Knowing it in the way they appeared the morning after I'd stayed late. After we'd shared coffee in his office like actual human beings instead of employer and employee. Theo emerged from his office at exactly 8:30, same as always. His eyes flickered to the flowers, then to my face, but his expression revealed nothing. Good morning, Iris. Do I have any urgent messages? 3. I've prioritized them by deadline. I handed him the notes, kept my voice professional, gave no indication that my heart was beating faster than it should. And the zoning board loved the presentation. They want to schedule a follow-up meeting next week. Excellent work. He took the messages, turned to go, paused. The flowers suit you. Then he was gone, disappearing into his office and closing the door behind him, leaving me staring at white lilies and wondering what game we were playing and whether I had any hope of winning. The lilies lasted a week before I finally threw them away, their petals browning at the edges like my resolve. More flowers appeared the next morning. Orchids this time, exotic and expensive, still with no card. I'd stopped bothering to pretend they weren't from Theo. Everyone in the office knew, even if no one said it aloud. 4 months into working for him, I got sick. Nothing dramatic, just a nasty flu that left me feverish and miserable, calling into work for the first time since I'd started at Corvino Enterprises. Theo's response came within minutes of my text. Stay home. Take care of yourself. Your sick days are paid. I should have known that wouldn't be the end of it. The knock on my apartment door came at noon. I dragged myself from the couch where I'd been rotting in my pajamas, fully prepared to tell whatever delivery person was there that they had the wrong address. Instead, I found Ivo standing in the hallway, holding a bag that smelled like chicken soup and medicine. Mr. Corvino asked me to check on you, he said, his gravelly voice somehow reassuring. May I come in? My apartment was a disaster. Tissues everywhere, dishes in the sink, me looking like death warmed over. Pride warred with practicality and lost. Sure. Come in. Ivo didn't comment on the mess. He simply moved to my tiny kitchen, unpacked the bag. Soup, crackers, medicine, orange juice, and tea that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. He wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. He didn't have to do this. No, Ivo agreed, arranging everything on my counter with surprising care for such a large man. But he wanted to. There's a difference. After he left, I sat on my couch staring at the provisions Theo had sent, trying to reconcile this gesture with the man I'd been so afraid of 5 months ago. The man I'd been certain would respond to violence with violence, who would solve my problems through force and intimidation and power. Instead, he'd sent soup. I returned to work 3 days later, still slightly weak but functional. Theo looked up from his desk when I knocked, and something in his face shifted when he saw me. "You look pale. Should you even be here?" "I'm fine." The soup helped. I set his coffee on the desk, back to our usual routine, as if the flowers and the care packages had never happened. "You have a conference call at 10 with the Marsetti family. The Marsettis can wait." He stood, came around the desk, and before I could process what was happening, he'd placed the back of his hand against my forehead. The touch was clinical, impersonal, but it sent electricity racing down my spine anyway. "You're still warm." "I'm always warm when I'm nervous." "Are you nervous now?" "You're touching me." He pulled his hand back immediately, stepped away, gave me space I suddenly didn't want. "I apologize. That was inappropriate." "It was," I agreed, even as some traitorous part of me wanted to lean into his touch, to let myself be cared for by someone who seemed to do it without expecting anything in return. "But thank you. For the soup, and the medicine, and everything." You're welcome." He returned to his desk, became all business again. "The Marsetti call is at 10, you said?" "Yes. Reschedule it. I need you to go home and rest properly." "Theo." "Not negotiable, Iris." His voice was firm but not unkind. "You're no good to me if you collapse. Ivo will drive you home." I wanted to argue, wanted to insist that I was fine, that I didn't need protecting or coddling or whatever this was. But the truth was, I was exhausted. And the idea of going home to my couch, of sleeping without worrying about bills or work or my mother, was too tempting to refuse. "Okay, thank you." That evening, as I dozed on my couch, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is your mother. I'm using your aunt's phone. The strangest thing happened today. A woman from some community foundation came by and offered me a part-time job. Administrative work, good pay, flexible hours. Do you know anything about this?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "That's wonderful, Mom. You should take it." I didn't tell her that I recognized the foundation's name from Theo's files. Didn't mention that I'd seen the paperwork for its funding just last week. Some things were better left unspoken. 6 months into my employment, Humberto made his first appearance since that night. Ivo called me at work, his voice tense. "He's outside your mother's building. I've already alerted the authorities, but I thought you should know." Terror clawed at my throat. "Is my mother okay?" "She's inside, safe. He hasn't approached the building. He's just sitting in his car across the street, but Mr. Corvino should be informed." "No." The word came out too sharp. "Don't tell him. I'll handle it." "Miss Frere, please, Ivo. Just keep watching. Make sure my mother stays inside. I'll figure out what to do." I hung up and tried to focus on work, but my hands trembled as I typed. Theo noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, just tired." He studied me for a long moment. "You're lying. You've never been a good liar, Iris. One of the things I appreciate about you." "It's personal. I'll handle it." "Is it Humberto?" My head snapped up. "How did you—" "Ivo reports to me. He called while you were on the phone with him." Theo's voice was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Where is he?" "It doesn't matter. I told Ivo to just watch, to make sure he doesn't do anything. The police won't do anything unless he actually threatens someone." Theo's jaw tightened. "You know how this works, Iris. You've lived it before." I had. God, I had. The useless police reports, the restraining orders that were just paper, the system that only responded after someone got hurt. But still, I couldn't let Theo be my solution. Couldn't let him become the violent answer to my violent problem. I said no before. That hasn't changed. I'm not asking permission. He stood, grabbed his jacket. I'm going to make sure your mother is safe. That's all. No violence, no threats, just presence. Theo, please. Would you rather I send someone else? Someone less inclined to restraint? His eyes held mine, and I saw the truth there. He would do this whether I agreed or not. The only choice I had was whether it would be him or one of the men who worked for him, men who might not share his careful control. Go. The word tasted like surrender. But if you... I won't. He crossed to me, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. I gave you my word once, Iris. I'm not him. I'm not any of them. Let me prove it. He left, and I sat at my desk trying to work and failing miserably. 45 minutes later, my phone rang. My mother, using her own phone this time, her voice shaky but relieved. The strangest thing just happened. Humberto was sitting outside in his car, and this man, very well dressed, very polite, went over and talked to him. I couldn't hear what they said, but Humberto left. Just drove away. And then the well-dressed man looked up at my window and nodded, like he knew I was watching, before he got in his own car and left too. That's good, Mom. That's really good. Do you know anything about this? About any of this? The job, the man, the way Humberto just disappeared? I have a very protective boss, I said carefully. That's all. Theo returned to the office an hour later, his expression unreadable. I looked up from my work as he approached my desk, my heart in my throat. Is he gone? He won't be bothering your mother again. Theo's voice was calm, matter of fact. I made it clear that there are consequences for harassment, legal consequences, financial consequences. I didn't touch him, Iris. I didn't even threaten him directly. I just explained his options. Relief and something else. Something warm and dangerous, flooded through me. Thank you. You're welcome. He started toward his office, paused. For what it's worth, you were right to be afraid of what I could do. I am capable of violence. I won't lie to you about that. But I'm also capable of restraint, of choosing not to solve every problem with my fists. He looked back at me, and the vulnerability in his expression made my chest ache. I need you to know the difference. I did know. God help me. I was starting to understand exactly what Theo Corvino was capable of, both the darkness and the light. 8 months. That's how long it took for me to stop flinching when Theo raised his hand to gesture during a conversation. 8 months of watching him navigate the world with careful control, of seeing him choose patience over power, restraint over retribution. 8 months of falling for him despite every warning bell in my head. It happened gradually, the way seasons change, too subtle to mark the exact moment winter becomes spring. I stopped jumping when he appeared at my desk, started looking forward to the quiet moments after everyone else had gone home, when we'd work side by side and he'd occasionally ask my opinion on something unrelated to business, a book he was reading, a restaurant he was considering, a charity he was thinking of supporting. What do you think about the arts program? He'd spread the grant applications across my desk late one Thursday evening. Which one would make the most difference? I studied the proposals, surprised he was asking. This one, the community theater. It serves the neighborhoods that don't have access to the Performing Arts Center downtown. That's what I thought too. He made a note on the application. But the symphony has more prestige. Since when do you care about prestige? He looked up, and I saw the hint of a smile. I don't. I wanted to see if you did. Is this a test? Everything's a test, Iris. You've been passing them for 8 months. The words hung between us, loaded with meaning I wasn't ready to examine. I turned back to the applications, tried to ignore the way my pulse had quickened. Then came the incident with the coffee. I'd been distracted, thinking about my mother's upcoming birthday, and how I could afford to get her something nice with my salary and the mysterious bonuses that kept appearing in my paychecks. I didn't notice the cup was overfilled until it was too late, until coffee was spilling across Theo's desk and soaking into the contracts he'd spent all morning reviewing. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I grabbed napkins, started blotting frantically at the spreading stain, my hands shaking with the adrenaline spike of having made a mistake. A big mistake. The kind of mistake that got people fired. Theo stood, moved around the desk, and I braced myself for the yelling. For the anger I'd never actually witnessed directed at me but had been waiting for anyway, certain it would come eventually because it always did. Men like him, powerful, controlled, dangerous, they all had breaking points. Iris. His hand covered mine, stilling my frantic movements. Breathe. I ruined the contracts, the Benedetti contracts. They're due tomorrow, and I ruined them. They're backed up digitally. We'll print new ones. His voice was calm, patient, impossibly gentle. It's just coffee. But I made a mistake. It happens. He took the soaked napkins from my trembling hands, set them aside, studied my face with that intensity I still wasn't used to. Why are you shaking? Because I'd been waiting for this moment. Waiting for the anger, the violence, the proof that I'd been right to be afraid. But it wasn't coming. Instead, Theo was looking at me with concern, his hands gentle as they steadied mine. I thought you'd be angry. I'm not angry. He frowned. Has anyone here made you feel like mistakes aren't acceptable? No. Everyone's been great. It's not that. I tried to pull my hands away, but he held them firmly, not painfully, just enough to keep me grounded. I'm not good with anger, yelling, that kind of thing. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Because of him, Humberto, and others before him. The admission slipped out. My mother has terrible taste in men. I grew up knowing that when things got spilled or broken or messed up, someone paid for it. Usually her. Sometimes me. Theo's jaw tightened, but his hands remained gentle on mine. I'm not them. How many times do I have to prove that before you believe it? I do believe it. And I did. That was the terrifying part. I'm just still adjusting. Then adjust. He released my hands, stepped back, gave me space. But know this. You could spill coffee on me every day for a year, and I still wouldn't raise my voice to you. That's not who I am with you. That's not who I'll ever be. That night, I went home and cried. Not from fear or frustration, but from the sheer overwhelming relief of being believed. Of not having to perform perfect competence every second of every day. Of being allowed to be human and fallible and still valued. The next morning, there were flowers on my desk again. Peonies this time, soft pink and ridiculously beautiful. You're going to run out of flower varieties eventually, I told Theo when he emerged from his office. There are over 400,000 species of flowering plants on Earth. He accepted his coffee, carefully poured this time, without breaking eye contact. I think we'll be fine. This is excessive. Is it making you uncomfortable? I considered lying, considered maintaining the professional distance that had been eroding for 8 months. But I was tired of lying, tired of hiding what I felt. No, it's making me happy. That's what makes me uncomfortable. Why? Because happy isn't safe. The words escaped before I could stop them. Happy means having something to lose. Theo set down his coffee, moved closer to my desk. You already have something to lose, Iris. You have your mother, your job, your safety. The flowers don't change that. They change how I feel about the person giving them to me. And how do you feel about that person? I met his eyes, saw the vulnerability there that he tried so hard to hide, saw the question he wasn't quite asking, the hope he wouldn't let himself express directly. Confused, grateful, terrified. I took a breath. Interested. Interested. He repeated the word like he was tasting it, testing its weight. I can work with interested. Theo, I'm not going to push, Iris. I've waited 8 months. I can wait longer. He picked up his coffee again. All business. But I need you to know, when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm here. Not as your boss. As someone who would very much like to take you to dinner somewhere that doesn't involve discussing work. He disappeared into his office before I could respond, leaving me staring at pink peonies and trying to remember why getting involved with my boss was a terrible idea. The problem was, I couldn't remember. All I could think about was the way he'd looked at me, like I was something precious, something worth waiting for, like I mattered beyond my utility, beyond my ability to schedule meetings and file paperwork. 2 weeks later, I got sick again. Nothing serious, just a headache that had bloomed into a migraine during the afternoon. I tried to push through, tried to maintain my usual efficiency, but Theo noticed within minutes. Go home. I'm fine. I just need some aspirin. You're squinting at your computer screen, and you've been rubbing your temples for the last 20 minutes. Go home, Iris. That's not a request. I wanted to argue, but my head was pounding too hard to form a coherent protest. Ivo drove me home, helped me to my door with the same careful courtesy he always showed. I collapsed on my couch, drew the curtains against the too bright afternoon light, and tried to sleep. The knock came an hour later. I almost didn't answer it, but the knocking was gentle, persistent, and somehow I knew who it would be before I opened the door. Theo stood in my hallway holding a pharmacy bag and looking completely out of place in his expensive suit against the backdrop of my shabby apartment building. You came yourself. I wanted to make sure you were okay. He held up the bag. I brought migraine medication. The prescription kind. I called your doctor. You called my doctor? I may have mentioned I was your boyfriend, and very concerned about your well-being. He had the grace to look slightly sheepish. She was very helpful once I explained the situation. We're not dating. I know, but employer checking on employee doesn't inspire the same level of medical cooperation. He stepped into my apartment when I moved aside, looked around at the small space I'd made home. This is nice. It wasn't nice. It was small and shabby, and nothing like the places Theo was used to. But he said it like he meant it, looking at the bookshelf I'd assembled myself, and the plants I somehow kept alive despite my irregular schedule. You didn't have to come here yourself. I wanted to. He set the medication on my coffee table, studied my face in the dim light. How bad is it? Bad enough that I'm seeing spots. Then take this. He opened the medication, shook out a pill, handed it to me with the water bottle he'd also brought, and lie down. I'll stay until you fall asleep. Theo, you can't. I can, and I will. He guided me gently to my couch, waited while I took the medication, then did something that made my heart stop. He sat on the floor beside the couch, his back against it, close enough that I could have reached out and touched his shoulder. Sleep, Iris. I'm not going anywhere. I should have sent him away, should have maintained boundaries, protected myself, kept my heart safely locked away from men who sent flowers and called themselves my boyfriend to my doctor and sat on my floor while I slept. But I was so tired. Tired of being strong, tired of being alone, tired of being afraid. Thank you, I whispered, already feeling the medication pulling me under. You're welcome. His voice was soft in the darkened room. Sleep well. I woke 3 hours later to find him exactly where he'd been, his jacket discarded, his tie loosened, his head tilted back against the couch. He'd stayed. The dangerous, powerful man who ran an empire had spent his afternoon sitting on my floor, making sure I was safe. "You're awake." He turned slightly, looked up at me. "How's your head?" "Better." I sat up slowly, processing the strangeness of having Theo Corvino in my living room. "You really stayed." "I said I would. People say a lot of things they don't mean. I'm not people." He stood, stretched muscles that must have cramped from sitting on the floor for hours. "I'm someone who keeps his promises. Especially to you." The weight of those words settled over me, heavy with implication. I looked at this man who I'd been so afraid of, who I'd been so certain would hurt me the way other men had hurt my mother. But 8 months had shown me something different. 8 months of patience, of gentleness, of choosing restraint when power would have been easier. Theo, his name felt different on my tongue, weighted with everything I'd been afraid to say. "I think I'm ready." "Ready for what?" "Dinner. Not as your secretary. As," I took a breath, took the leap, "as someone who's interested." The smile that spread across his face was worth every moment of fear, every second of doubt. "Finally." "Don't get cocky. I'm still terrified." "Good." He moved closer, knelt beside the couch so we were eye to eye. Being terrified means you're paying attention. It means you understand what's at stake. His hand came up to cup my face, gentle as always, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. "But I promise you, Iris, whatever you're afraid of, whatever you think this could become, I will never be what you fear. I'll prove it to you every day for the rest of our lives if that's what it takes." I leaned into his touch, let myself finally believe what 8 months had been trying to teach me. Some men kept their promises. Some men chose patience over violence, protection over possession. Some men sent flowers and sat on floors and called themselves your boyfriend to get you medication. "Kiss me," I whispered, feeling brave and terrified in equal measure. He did, soft and careful and perfect, like I was something precious he was afraid of breaking. And for the first time in my life, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I could be both precious and safe. Dating Theo Corvino was nothing like I'd expected, and exactly what I should have known it would be. He was patient, careful, always asking permission before crossing boundaries I'd spent years erecting. Our first official date was dinner at a small Italian restaurant in a neighborhood far from the usual places his business took him. Somewhere quiet where we could just be two people sharing a meal instead of employer and employee. "You're nervous," he observed, watching me fidget with my napkin. "Everyone's staring at us." "They're staring at me. They always do." He reached across the table, took my hand in his. "But I only see you." It should have sounded like a line. From anyone else, it would have been. But Theo said it with the same matter-of-fact certainty he brought to every declaration, like he was simply stating an observable truth. Over pasta and wine. 1 glass for me, since he remembered I didn't drink much. He told me things about himself I'd never known. About his childhood in a neighborhood not unlike where my mother lived now. About the father who'd built an empire through equal parts vision and ruthlessness. About the choice he'd made to continue that legacy while trying to do it differently. "I won't pretend I'm a good man, Iris. My business involves things you're better off not knowing about." His thumb traced patterns on the back of my hand. "But with you, I want to be better. You make me want to be better. I don't think I should have that much power over you. Too late. You already do." We left through the kitchen, Theo's way of avoiding the photographers who'd apparently learned about our dinner, and he drove me home in a car that probably cost more than my entire building. At my door, he kissed me goodnight, with the same careful restraint he'd shown in my apartment, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. "I'll see you at work tomorrow," he said, smiling at my raised eyebrow. What? You thought I'd let you quit? Isn't it a conflict of interest? Probably. But you're excellent at your job, and I'm not letting you go. His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone in that gesture that had become familiar. Unless you want to quit. I'd understand if... I kissed him to shut him up, poured 8 months of want and fear and hope into it, and felt him smile against my lips. I'll take that as a no. Work the next day was surprisingly normal. We maintained our professional dynamic, though I caught him watching me sometimes with an expression that made my stomach flutter. The other secretaries noticed, of course they did, but no one said anything directly. Theo Corvino's personal life was apparently off-limits for office gossip. 3 months into our relationship, he took me to meet his mother. Gabriella Corvino was a small, fierce woman who took one look at me and pulled me into a hug that smelled like garlic and expensive perfume. Finally, he brings a girl home who looks at him like a person instead of a meal ticket. She held me at arm's length, studied my face with dark eyes that were remarkably similar to her son's. You're good for him. I can tell. Dinner at the Corvino family home was overwhelming in the best way. Theo's sisters, 3 of them, all loud and opinionated and nothing like the quiet, controlled man I knew, peppered me with questions while his mother kept piling food on my plate. His younger brother, Gilberto, pulled me aside at one point. You're different from the others he's dated, he observed, watching Theo argue good-naturedly with his sister Helena about politics. You don't seem afraid of him. Should I be? Most people are. Gilberto studied me thoughtfully. But I guess you've seen the parts of him he hides from everyone else. The parts that are actually kind. I had. God, I had. 6 months of dating. Theo had shown me layers I never expected. The man who called his mother every Sunday, who remembered his nieces' and nephews' birthdays, who donated anonymously to causes he believed in, and never sought credit for his generosity. He's a good man, I said simply. He is with you. Gilberto's expression grew serious. Whatever you're doing, whatever you bring out in him, keep doing it. We've never seen him this happy. The real test came when I finally invited him to meet my mother. She'd been nervous for days, cleaning her small apartment until it gleamed, fretting about what to cook for the man who'd, though she didn't know all the details, basically saved her life. Mom, he's not going to judge your cooking. He owns half the restaurants in the city, Iris. Of course he's going to judge my cooking. But Theo arrived with flowers for my mother and compliments for her simple meal, eating seconds and thirds like it was the finest cuisine he'd ever tasted. He asked about her job, the one he'd arranged through his foundation, and listened to her talk about her work with genuine interest. After dinner, he helped with the dishes despite my mother's protests, and I watched from the doorway as they worked side by side, this powerful man and my fragile mother, and felt something shift in my chest. He's wonderful, my mother whispered to me later as Theo took a phone call on the small balcony. Nothing like... I know. I hugged her, felt her relax against me in a way she never had when I was growing up. He's nothing like any of them. 1 year into our relationship, Theo asked me to move in with him. Not demanded, not assumed. Asked, with the same careful respect he'd shown me from the beginning. I know it's fast. I know you value your independence. We were in his penthouse. I'd started staying over a few nights a week, and he looked genuinely nervous. But I hate the nights you're not here. I hate knowing you're across the city instead of next to me. And before you say it, yes, I know that's possessive and probably not healthy, but it's the truth. I looked around the space that had become familiar over the past year, so different from my shabby apartment but starting to feel like home anyway. What about my mother? I can't just abandon her. I'd never ask you to. He pulled me close, wrapped his arms around me with that perfect pressure that made me feel safe instead of trapped. What if we got her a place nearby? Better security, closer to her work. I know a building. You always know a building. It's kind of my business. He pressed a kiss to my temple. She could be 5 minutes away instead of across the city. You could see her every day if you wanted. It was too much. Too generous. Too perfect. Too everything I'd been afraid to want. But I'd learned over the past year that Theo's generosity didn't come with strings attached, didn't require repayment or subservience or surrender of my autonomy. Okay. I tilted my head back to look at him. But I'm paying rent. Don't be ridiculous. Theo, fine, you can pay rent. The smile playing at his lips told me he was humoring me. $1 a month. That's not... Take it or leave it, Iris. Some battles you're not going to win. I moved in the following month. My mother settled into a beautiful apartment 3 blocks away, close enough to visit easily, far enough to maintain our independence. Evo's protection extended to her building too, though she still didn't know the full extent of Theo's involvement in her safety. Living with Theo was like dating him, only more so. He was thoughtful in ways I'd never experienced, remembering I liked my coffee a specific temperature, keeping the bathroom stocked with my favorite products, giving me space when I needed it, and proximity when I didn't. But he was also possessive in ways that should have bothered me more than they did. He didn't like when I went out without telling him where I'd be. He worried when I stayed late at work, which was ironic, since I technically worked for him. He had opinions about my friends, my schedule, my safety. You're being overprotective. I told him one evening after he'd questioned why I needed to meet Gabriella from accounting for drinks. I'm being appropriately protective. He looked up from his laptop, expression serious. You're the most important thing in my life, Iris. I'm not going to apologize for wanting to keep you safe. I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm asking you to trust that I can take care of myself. I do trust that. He closed the laptop, gave me his full attention, but the world is dangerous, and I know exactly how dangerous because I'm part of what makes it that way. Let me have this. Let me know where you are, who you're with. Not because I don't trust you, but because it's the only thing that keeps me sane. I'd crossed the room, settled into his lap, felt his arms wrap around me with that now familiar combination of possession and protection. Okay, but you have to trust that I'll tell you if it becomes too much. I will, I promise. 18 months into our relationship, Humberto appeared one last time. Not physically, Evo made sure of that, but in the form of a threatening email to my mother. Something about wanting to talk, about unfinished business, about how he'd found out where she lived. I found out when my mother called, her voice shaking with a fear I'd hoped she'd never feel again. I was at work, at my desk outside Theo's office, and the moment he heard my tone change, he was there. What happened? I showed him the email my mother had forwarded. Watched his expression go from concern to ice cold in the space between heartbeats. Pack your things. We're leaving. Theo, I can't just... You can and you will. He was already typing on his phone, messages flying to people I couldn't see. I'm going to take care of this, permanently, and I don't want you here when I do. Fear spiked through me. What does permanently mean? He looked up, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen directed at me before. The cold, calculated danger that made other men afraid. It means he'll never threaten your mother again. It means this ends today. Theo, please. I grabbed his arm, felt the tension thrumming through him. Don't do something you can't take back. Don't become what I was afraid you were. I am what you were afraid I was, Iris. His voice was gentle despite the fury I could feel vibrating beneath his skin. I've always been that man. The only difference is that I've chosen not to show you that side of me. But when someone threatens you or your mother, that choice becomes very difficult to maintain. Then choose it anyway. I moved closer, forced him to look at me instead of his phone. Choose to be the man who sends flowers and sits on floors and keeps his promises. Choose to handle this the way you've handled everything else, with patience and control and restraint. The internal struggle played out across his face, the fury warring with the control I'd come to rely on. Finally, he exhaled slowly, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Okay, no violence. But he's going to wish I'd chosen differently. He kissed my forehead, lingering there. Go home. Take your mother to our place. I'll handle this and meet you there tonight. Promise me. I promise, Iris. No violence, just consequences. I went home and gathered my mother, brought her to the penthouse she'd only visited once before. We waited together, drinking tea and pretending neither of us was terrified about what Theo might do despite his promises. He came home 6 hours later, looking tired but satisfied. Found us in the living room and went straight to my mother. Mrs. Helena, Humberto won't be contacting you again. I've arranged for a restraining order. A real one, with teeth. I've also ensured that his employer is aware of his extracurricular activities. And I've made it clear to certain parties that any future harassment will be met with legal action that will make his life very difficult. My mother stared at him. You did all that in 6 hours? I'm very efficient. He turned to me, and the dangerous man who'd left that morning was gone, replaced by the one I'd fallen in love with. No violence, as promised. I went to him, wrapped my arms around him, felt the tension finally drain from his body. Thank you. Anything for you? He held me close, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Anything to keep you safe. Always. That night, after my mother had gone to the guest room and Theo and I lay tangled together in our bed, he traced patterns on my bare shoulder and said something that made my heart stop. Marry me. I pushed up to look at him, certain I'd misheard. What? Marry me, Iris. He wasn't smiling, wasn't making it romantic or elaborate, just stating it with the same certainty he brought to every important declaration. I don't have a ring yet, because I wanted to ask first, wanted to make sure you'd say yes before I made it official. But I'm asking now. Be my wife. Let me protect you and your mother forever. Let me love you the way you deserve to be loved. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. This is the least romantic proposal ever. I know. I'm terrible at this. He wiped my tears with his thumbs, his own eyes suspiciously bright. But I mean every word. I want forever with you, Iris. I want to wake up next to you every morning and know that you're mine and I'm yours. I want to build a life together, a family together. I kissed him, poured everything I felt into it. The fear and the hope and the love I'd been too afraid to name. Yes. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to forever. Yes to all of it. I smiled through my tears. But you're getting me a ring, a really nice one. Because if I'm going to be Iris Corvino, I want everyone to know it. His laugh was pure joy. Deal. The ring appeared 3 days later, an emerald surrounded by diamonds that caught the light and scattered it like promises. Theo slipped it onto my finger over breakfast, his hand steady even though I could see the nerves in his eyes. It's perfect, I whispered, watching the way it looked on my hand. It's too much, but it's perfect. Nothing is too much for you. He kissed my knuckles, right above the ring. I'd give you the world if you'd let me. I just want you, the real you, the man who sends flowers and keeps promises and sits on floors while I sleep. That's who I am with you. That's who I'll always be with you. We told my mother that evening. She cried. Happy tears this time. Relief and joy mixing together as she pulled both of us into a hug that smelled like the lavender sachets she kept in her closet. You'll be good to her, she said to Theo. Not a question, but a statement. You'll protect her the way I couldn't." "I will." His arm was steady around my waist, anchoring me. "With everything I have." The wedding was small, intimate, nothing like the elaborate affairs Theo's business connections expected, just family in a garden venue his mother had helped us find. Flowers everywhere and joy soaking into every moment. My mother walked me down the aisle, both of us wearing dresses that Theo had insisted on buying despite my protests. She looked healthier than I'd seen her in years, her eyes clear and her smile genuine as she placed my hand in Theo's. "Take care of my girl," she whispered to him. "Always," he promised, and meant it with every fiber of his being. The ceremony was traditional, the vows personal. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Theo's youngest niece, 6 years old and full of opinions, shouted, "No way!" loud enough to make everyone laugh. His family had welcomed me completely, treating me not as an outsider but as someone who'd always belonged. "I, Theo Corvino, take you, Iris Frary, to be my wife." His hands were steady on mine, his voice carrying across the garden. "I promise to protect you, to cherish you, to be patient when you need me to be, and strong when you need that instead. I promise to send you flowers for the rest of our lives, and to never, ever raise my voice to you. I promise to be worthy of your trust, your love, your faith in me." My own vows came out shaky with emotion. "I, Iris Frary, take you, Theo Corvino, to be my husband. I promise to believe in you even when I'm afraid, to trust you even when it's hard, to love you for exactly who you are. I promise to be brave enough to accept your protection and strong enough to stand beside you. I promise to be yours, completely and forever." The kiss that sealed our marriage was witnessed by everyone we loved, approved by the universe itself, it seemed. When we broke apart, Theo rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "Mine, yours," I agreed, meaning it in ways I'd never thought possible. "Always yours." The reception was loud and joyful, his family celebrating with an enthusiasm that matched their personalities. My mother danced with Theo's father, a fierce man who'd built an empire and somehow raised a son who knew when to choose patience over power. I watched them together and saw the future: safety, security, love that didn't hurt. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had departed and the sky had darkened to velvet, Theo pulled me aside to a quiet corner of the garden. "I have something for you, another wedding gift. You've already given me too much. Not this." He handed me an envelope, watched my face as I opened it. Inside was a deed to a house, 3 bedrooms, in a neighborhood I'd mentioned loving months ago. "For your mother, her own place, fully paid for. No rent, no landlords, no worrying about making ends meet. Just hers, free and clear." I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. This man, this dangerous, powerful man who could have solved every problem with violence, had instead chosen this: security for the woman who'd suffered so much, peace for the mother who'd never had enough of it. "You didn't have to do this. I wanted to." He pulled me close, and I went willingly, fitting against him like we'd been designed for exactly this purpose. "She gave me you, Iris. This is the least I can do." We found my mother sitting with Theo's mother, the two of them laughing over something Theo's sister had said. When I handed her the envelope, when she opened it and saw what it meant, her tears started fresh. "I can't accept this. It's too much." "Mom." I knelt beside her chair, took her hands in mine. "You spent your whole life struggling, sacrificing, surviving. Let someone take care of you for once. Let us give you this." She looked at Theo, who'd settled beside me, his hand warm on my back. "Why? Why would you do this for me?" "Because you're Iris's mother. Because you survived things no one should have to survive. because you raised an incredible woman who taught me that patience is stronger than power." He smiled, genuine and warm. "And because I can. Let me use my resources for something that actually matters." The house became my mother's haven. We helped her move in over the next few weeks, Theo's family showing up to paint and arrange furniture and fill the space with warmth. Watching my mother settle into her own home, truly her own, with no fear of eviction or violence or instability, was almost as wonderful as marrying the man who'd made it possible. 6 months into our marriage, I stood in our penthouse kitchen making breakfast while Theo worked at his laptop at the counter. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching on my wedding ring and scattering light across the marble. "You're staring," I said, without looking up from the eggs I was scrambling. "You're beautiful." I'm allowed to stare at my wife. "You see me every day." "I know. I'm very lucky." He closed his laptop, came around the counter to wrap his arms around me from behind. His chin rested on my shoulder, his breath warm against my neck. "Do you know what today is?" "Wednesday? It's been 2 years since you spilled coffee on my contracts and thought I'd fire you for it." I laughed, remembering my panic, my certainty that one mistake would undo everything. "You brought it up at our wedding, in your speech. Because it was important. That was when I knew." "Knew what?" "That you'd been hurt before. That you expected anger and got patience instead. That I needed to be careful with you, gentle, because you'd learned to expect violence, and I needed to teach you something different." I turned in his arms, looked up at the man who'd somehow become my entire world. "You did teach me something different. You taught me that love doesn't have to hurt, that power doesn't have to destroy, that some men keep their promises. Always." He kissed me, soft and sweet, the way he'd kissed me 1,000 times before and would kiss me 1,000 times more. "I'll always keep my promises to you." My mother called later that afternoon, excited about the garden she was planting in her backyard. Theo's gift had included landscaping, and she'd discovered a passion for growing things in soil that was finally, truly hers. "You should see the tomatoes, Iris. They're going to be beautiful." "I'll come by tomorrow. We can have lunch in your new gazebo." "Bring Theo. I made that pasta he likes." I smiled, watching my husband through the window where he'd taken a call on the terrace. "I will, Mom. I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart. And Iris, thank you." "For what?" "For being brave enough to trust him, for being strong enough to accept help, for showing me that happy endings are possible." After we hung up, I joined Theo on the terrace. The city spread out below us, vast and complicated, and full of both beauty and danger. But up here, in this space we'd carved out together, I felt safe. "Everything okay?" he asked, pulling me against his side. "Everything's perfect." And it was. Not perfect in the fairy tale sense. We still argued sometimes, still navigated the complexities of our different worlds, still worked to balance his protective instincts with my need for independence. But perfect in the way that mattered. Honest, safe, built on a foundation of trust that had been tested and proven. "I'm glad." He pressed a kiss to my temple, a gesture that had become his signature. "Because I plan on everything being perfect for the next 50 or 60 years. Think you can handle that?" I looked up at him, at the man who'd proven that some powerful men chose patience, that some dangerous men chose gentleness, that some wealthy men chose to use their resources to protect instead of possess. "I think I can handle that." And standing there in the golden afternoon light, wrapped in the arms of the man who'd taught me what love should feel like, I knew I was telling the truth. We'd found our happy ending, my mother and I. Not because we'd been rescued, but because we'd been brave enough to accept help from someone who offered it without conditions. The bruises had faded long ago, but the love we'd built in their place would last forever. 2 years into our marriage, I woke to find Theo already awake, watching me with that intensity I'd grown to crave instead of fear. The morning light filtered through our bedroom curtains, casting golden patterns across the white sheets that had become our sanctuary. "You're staring again," I murmured, stretching against him. "I'm appreciating," he corrected, his hand tracing lazy patterns down my spine. "There's a difference. What are you appreciating at 6 in the morning? The fact that you're here, that you chose to stay, that every morning for 2 years, I've woken up next to you, and it still feels like a miracle." I propped myself up on one elbow, studying the face I knew better than my own now. The sharp angles had softened slightly with contentment, the lines around his eyes deepening from smiles instead of stress. He looked younger somehow, despite being 36 now, as if happiness had turned back time. "You say the most ridiculous things sometimes," I told him, but my voice was thick with emotion. "They're only ridiculous if they're not true." His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing across my cheekbone in that gesture that never failed to make my heart skip. "I love you, Iris Corvino. More today than yesterday. More tomorrow than today." That's mathematically impossible. Love doesn't multiply infinitely. Watch me prove you wrong. He pulled me down for a kiss that tasted like promises and coffee and home. An hour later, we sat in our kitchen, a space we'd renovated together, arguing over cabinet colors and countertop materials until we'd found the perfect compromise. Theo insisted on making breakfast every Saturday, a tradition he'd started when we first got married and maintained with stubborn dedication. "Your mother called yesterday," he said, sliding perfectly scrambled eggs onto my plate. "She wants to host Sunday dinner at her place this week. Something about showing off her new gazebo." I smiled, thinking of the transformation my mother had undergone over the past 2 years. The house Theo had given her had become a haven, not just for her, but for her growing circle of friends, women she'd met through the community center, neighbors who'd become confidants, a book club that gathered in her living room every Thursday. "She's happy," I said, more to myself than to him. "She deserves to be." Theo sat across from me, his own plate forgotten as he watched me eat. "You both do. We are, because of you." "No." His voice was firm. "You're happy because you chose to be, because you were brave enough to accept help, but strong enough to build your own life. I just provided resources. You did the hard work." It was a conversation we'd had variations of 100 times, me crediting him for our stability, him insisting I'd earned it myself. The truth, I'd come to understand, lay somewhere in between. Theo had opened doors, but I'd walked through them. He'd offered protection, but I'd chosen to trust it. He'd given us opportunities, but we'd made them into something meaningful. "The foundation is hosting a gala next month," I said, changing the subject before the emotion in my chest could overflow into tears. I'd taken on a larger role at Theo's charitable foundation over the past year, transitioning from his secretary to the foundation's program director. "We need to finalize the guest list." "Already done. Gabriella from accounting helped me yesterday." He grinned at my surprised expression. "What? I'm capable of handling administrative tasks." "You're capable of delegating administrative tasks. There's a difference." "Semantics." He took a bite of his eggs, then added casually, "I also may have arranged for your mother to be one of the honored guests. She doesn't know yet." My fork clattered against my plate. "Theo, she'll be terrified. All those wealthy people. We'll see a woman who survived impossible circumstances and built a beautiful life. A woman who raised an incredible daughter and now volunteers at 3 different community centers, helping other women find their strength." His eyes met mine, serious now. "Your mother is a warrior, Iris. It's time the world recognized that." Tears did fall then, hot and fast down my cheeks. Theo was around the table in an instant, kneeling beside my chair, his hands gentle as they wiped away the wetness. Happy tears? Or sad tears? Happy. Always happy with you. I pulled him closer, buried my face in his neck, breathed in the scent that meant safety and home. How did I get so lucky? I ask myself the same question every day. He held me until the tears subsided, then pulled back to look at me. There's something else I wanted to talk to you about. The seriousness in his tone made my stomach flutter. What is it? I've been thinking about expanding the Foundation's reach, opening satellite offices in other cities, helping more people. He stood, pulled me to my feet, led me to the living room where he'd apparently prepared a presentation on his laptop. But I wanted your input before making any decisions. For the next hour, he walked me through plans and budgets and possibilities. New programs for women escaping domestic violence, job training initiatives, housing assistance, educational scholarships. The scope was breathtaking, the potential impact immeasurable. This would change thousands of lives, I said, scrolling through the projections. That's the idea. He sat beside me on the couch, his hand finding mine. But I won't do it without you. This is our foundation now, Iris. Your vision matters as much as mine. Our foundation. 2 years ago, I'd been terrified of owing him anything, of being trapped by his generosity. Now we were partners in everything: marriage, business, life. The shift had been so gradual I'd barely noticed it happening, trust building layer by layer until the foundation was unshakable. I think it's brilliant, I said. But we'll need to hire more staff. I can't manage expansion and still be home for Sunday dinners with my mother. Already budgeted for it. I thought maybe we could promote Gabriella to assistant director. She's been asking for more responsibility. You've thought of everything. I try. He kissed my temple, lingering there. Though there is one thing I haven't figured out yet. What's that? When you're going to stop being surprised that I actually listen to you. I laughed, the sound filling our home with warmth. Probably never. I grew up thinking powerful men didn't listen to anyone. Then I'll spend the rest of our lives proving you wrong. That afternoon, we visited my mother at her house. She greeted us at the door with flour on her apron and joy in her eyes, a combination I'd never seen before. Theo had given her this space to breathe, to heal, to become the woman she'd always been beneath the fear. I'm making bread, she announced, pulling me into a hug that smelled like yeast and happiness. Your grandmother's recipe. I found it in some old boxes and thought I'd try it. Theo followed us into the kitchen, immediately rolling up his sleeves to help without being asked. This too had become tradition. Saturday visits where we cooked together, told stories, laughed until our sides hurt. My mother treated Theo like the son she'd never had, and he responded with the same gentle respect he'd shown her from the beginning. Iris tells me you want to host Sunday dinner here next week, Theo said, kneading dough with surprising competence. His hands, which signed contracts worth millions, and had once, though he'd never confirmed it, done things I didn't want to know about, shaped bread with careful precision. If that's okay, I know you usually cook. It's more than okay, Helena. We'd be honored. He glanced at me, then back to my mother. Actually, there's something we wanted to tell you about the Foundation Gala next month. I watched my mother's face as Theo explained about the honor, about wanting to recognize her volunteer work, about how much she'd inspired others in the community. Her hands stilled on the dough, her eyes growing wide and then bright with tears. I can't accept that. I'm nobody special. I just help out where I can. You're special to me, I said, moving to stand beside her. And to all the women you've mentored. You've turned your pain into purpose, Mom. That deserves recognition. I don't have anything to wear to a fancy gala. Already handled, Theo said with a smile. Iris and I would like to take you shopping next weekend. Our treat. No arguments. My mother looked between us, her expression a mixture of overwhelm and gratitude and love so pure it made my chest ache. You've both given me so much already. The house, the job, the safety. You gave me Iris, Theo interrupted gently. Everything else is just a thank you for that gift. Later, as we drove home through the city streets, I watched Theo navigate traffic with the same careful control he brought to everything. The man who could command a room full of powerful executives with a single look, who could make problems disappear with a phone call, who could be ruthless when necessary. That man sat beside me humming along to the radio, his hand linked with mine across the console. Thank you, I said into the comfortable silence. For what? For loving my mother like she's yours too, for making her feel valued and safe, for giving her a reason to bake bread and plant gardens and believe in happy endings. She's family. That's what you do for family. He brought our joined hands to his lips, pressed a kiss to my knuckles. Besides, she raised you. That makes her one of the most important people in my life. That night, we attended a business dinner with some of Theo's associates, the kind of event that had intimidated me when we first got married, but now felt routine. I'd learned to navigate these gatherings, had developed my own relationships with the wives and partners, had even started to understand some of the coded language the men used when discussing business. Your wife is a treasure, Corvino, one of the older men said, his accent thick with old country inflections. Smart, beautiful, and she doesn't gossip. Where did you find her? She found me, Theo replied, his hand possessive on my waist. Best thing that ever happened to me. The man laughed, clapping Theo on the shoulder. You've changed, my friend. Settled down, mellowed out. Marriage suits you. It does, Theo agreed, his eyes meeting mine across the table. It really does. On the drive home, he was quieter than usual, his expression thoughtful as he navigated the late-night streets. What are you thinking about? I asked. Children. The word hung in the air between us, weighted with possibility and hope and questions we'd danced around for months. Oh, I managed, my heart suddenly racing. I know we haven't really talked about it. I didn't want to pressure you, didn't want you to think I expected... He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. But I'd like to have children with you, Iris. If that's something you want too. I thought about all the reasons I'd been afraid to bring it up myself. The fear of passing on trauma, of not being a good enough mother, of bringing children into a world that could be dangerous and cruel. But I also thought about the home we'd built, the safety we'd created, the love that filled every corner of our life together. I want that too, I whispered. I'm scared, but I want it. We'll be scared together, Theo said, pulling the car to a stop in our building's garage. He turned to face me, his expression open in a way it only was when we were alone. And we'll figure it out together, just like we've figured out everything else. What if I'm not good at it? What if I mess them up? Then we'll mess them up together and pay for their therapy later. His smile was gentle, understanding. But I don't think you could mess up a child if you tried, Iris. You have too much love to give. So do you. You proved that with me, with my mother. You know how to protect without controlling, how to love without hurting. I learned that from you. He cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across my cheekbones. You taught me that strength can be gentle, that power doesn't have to destroy, that the best way to keep someone safe is to help them believe in their own strength. We sat in the car for a long time, holding each other, imagining the future, children who would grow up knowing safety and stability and unconditional love. Children who would have grandparents who adored them, aunts and uncles who spoiled them, parents who would fight to give them everything we'd had to fight for ourselves. Not yet, I said finally, but soon. I want to enjoy being just us for a little while longer." "However long you need," Theo promised. "I'm not going anywhere." And he wasn't. That was the miracle I woke up to every morning. The knowledge that Theo Corvino, with all his power and danger and intensity, had chosen me. Chosen patience over force. Chosen to stay when leaving would have been easier. Chosen to prove every day that love didn't have to hurt. We'd built something beautiful from broken pieces. We'd turned fear into trust, pain into healing, survival into thriving. And every day, in 100 small ways, we continued to choose each other. That night, as we lay tangled together in our bed, Theo traced patterns on my shoulder and whispered, "I love you, Iris, my wife, my partner, my heart." "I love you too," I whispered back. "My protector, my home, my always." Outside our windows, the city continued its restless motion. But inside our sanctuary, everything was still, peaceful, perfect. We'd found our happy ending and discovered it was really just the beginning. Of family, of purpose, of a love that would continue to grow and deepen with every passing year. The bruises had faded long ago, both the visible ones and the invisible scars that had taken longer to heal. In their place was something stronger, something that couldn't be broken by fear or doubt or the darkness of the past. In their place was love, patient and powerful and permanent. The kind of love that sent flowers and sat on floors and kept promises. The kind of love that transformed broken girls into strong women and dangerous men into devoted husbands. The kind of love worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth building a lifetime around. And as I drifted toward sleep in Theo's arms, I sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. For the courage to trust, for the strength to heal, for the miracle of finding home in the last place I'd expected to look, for finding everything I'd never dared to hope for in the man who'd proven that some powerful men choose to protect instead of possess, to cherish instead of control, to love instead of harm. For finding Theo and discovering that happy endings were possible after all.